So now that we've established that such implications can be connected to names, we can also see that bias due to emotion can affect perception of a certain name, and that has been proven through through science. For example, when different races are shown to a person, they have different synapses go off in their brains, and through this theory of description, names cannot be they're inseparable from the context which they're in. So, for example, Mumbai, if a stranger who had never heard of Mumbai were to be told of Mumbai, it would not mean anything to them unless we told them about the context in which it was, in which the name occurred. So, by the same logic, Bombay's context lies within colonial rule, and therefore it can evoke different memories of such colonial rule and have different connotations to that of Mumbai. A different perspective states that names are independent from the ideas that are behind them. So, for example, it has been reported that lots of people living in Mumbai under colonial rule for around 200 years still called it Mumbai. They didn't change their ways, and so Mumbai had the same meaning for them as it did then before colonial rule as it does after. And Bombay, now 50 years after the British left, does it still have the same connotations as it did then? Because as we discussed, that context cannot be separated from names. What occurs if the context behind the name shifts or changes? Because there's people living in Mumbai now will not have the same experiences and memories as those under colonial rule, and therefore will not attach the same emotion to Bombay, to the word Bombay, as the others did. Then the word Mumbai it doesn't describe the city just by being the name. It describes the city in reference to something else. So this means that the meaning behind Mumbai is attached to it by somebody else, by humans and by other people who live there, and therefore you can glean that names are not they're not used to describe a certain feature of a place, but instead the names are decided upon by the people who speak. Because if Mumbai is more prevalent, more widely spoken than Bombay is, then the most widely accepted form of the city's name will be Mumbai. Mm-hmm. And if names were descriptive, then you'd come across other problems with that knowledge claim, because you'd have to think about which features of the city do they describe, or who decides what they describe, or which feature, or what's unique about it. And if you say that the name is separable from the idea behind it, then it's not the name that evokes the emotion during colonial rule it's not the name that evokes the emotion about colonial rule, but rather the idea behind the name. So therefore, as I said before, if a stranger were to hear the name, they wouldn't have the same connotations or the same emotions as people who have been taught otherwise. Other real-life situations that both contradict and support this. For example, when Coke was trying to introduce a new version of Coke, during blind taste tests, it was suggested that the new version was much better. But when they were actually meant to be sold, people didn't buy it because they had an emotional attachment to the old brand of Coke with the name. And in the same vein of thought, when people were told that they were eating low-fat cheese, they thought that it was bad, but when they were fed it in a blind test, then they didn't really feel any sort of difference. So this shows that there definitely is a connection between emotion and a name. A label can change our perception of an object or a place, but as I said before, it might not be the name itself, but what we have been taught about the name, or what personal experiences may have affected our perception of the name. So, to conclude, language definitely does contain connotations that may evoke some sort of emotion in a person, but that perception is only affected by it can be affected by personal experience um, or knowledge we have gleaned from other ways of knowing or other factors. It's not by virtue of the name itself, and therefore these connotations cannot be universal, because they're not true in every case. And as I've said, like Bombay doesn't have the same meaning as it did in 1950 as it does in 2015. So this shows how they can change over time, and therefore names may not always be descriptive.